The seed for ocean cloud started many, many years ago. It was another one of those things I saw on the news, you know, that like the seed that planted out of this world and everything, you know, the news item. And it was this guy called Tony Bullymore, this old salty seafaring bloke, who had been trying, I think he was a lone yachtsman, and he'd been trying to get across the Pacific. And he'd been hit by a storm and his boat had been turned upside down somewhere off the coast of Australia. And he was caught in an air pocket under the upturned boat, which kept him alive. So even although he was underwater under this boat, and he'd managed to breathe. There was enough air left in the upturned hull of the boat to keep him alive. And when the rescue services, luckily for him, got there to find this upturned keel of this yacht, they could hear somebody banging inside, you know, and they managed to get divers in and pull him out. And he was almost dead, but he lived. And so it was this amazing rescue story of this English seafarer. This old fella was a bit of a character anyway, you know, and capable of spinning a yarn, and his remarkable escape, and that sat at the back of my mind for years and years. And I've got this fascination with the sea, and I don't know where it comes from. You know, my dad was a sailor, and maybe it just goes back to when I was a kid, and he used to tell me all these stories. Or maybe it goes back further than that, because I've been told by a medium that I was a sailor and a fisherman in a former life, in France actually. And I don't know if any of that's true, but nonetheless, I have got this strange empathy with the sea and a kind of romantic notion of it, I suppose, as well. So I tend to write a lot about the sea. Tony Bullymore. So then Steve was... How did it happen? Seen too much of life and there's no going back. The loneliness calls him, and the edge which must be sharpened. I suppose it's about getting old and wondering if you can still hack it, but also getting to an age, again this is that same thing I was talking about earlier, where you get to an age where you feel removed from popular culture and you feel that somehow the world doesn't sit quite so well with you as it used to. It doesn't make as much sense to you. And that whole idea of maybe the world's going to the devil and you'd be better off without it, and you know, you wanting to live more according to your own code rather than the code that's passed down as, you know, fashion and morality. It's sometimes better to have your own rule book and have your own idea of what's right and wrong and which way to go. Because none of those codes are ever completely right. You might as well write your own. You're going to have as much idea as anyone else. It's the Bible. So it's about this guy who sets off rowing. I thought he should be a rower because that's the ultimate test of endurance. These guys who row across oceans, how on earth do they do that? So I had a look on the internet. I put ocean rowing in on the internet and dug out the Ocean Rowing Society, which of course I didn't know existed. That's the beauty of the internet. You can just go and find things anywhere in the world without, you know, in about 10 seconds. I mean, it really is so incredible. And you know, already we take that for granted, but it is astounding that you can do that. And I found this Ocean Rowing Society. And on their homepage, if you dig around a little bit, you can find the diary of this guy called Don Allen, who sadly is no more, but he's the only person on Earth ever to row across the Atlantic Ocean in both directions. And the fact that this guy remains totally unknown is an outrage. You know, we all know Sir Edmund Hillary is, we all know Donald Campbell is, we all know bloody Scott of the Antarctic is, and he never even got there. And here's a guy who's rowed both ways across the Atlantic. I'm sorry, but for me that's a bigger deal than climbing Everest. That is astounding. Um, and you know, no one's heard of him. And his diary is published on the Ocean Rowing website, so you can read day by day. It was from his second trip where he set off from Newfoundland to row back across the Atlantic to either France or England or whatever he encountered. And he ended up being washed ashore, literally washed ashore, half dead, off the coast of Ireland, the west coast of Ireland. And the people from the village literally dragged him out of the sea because he was hit by two massive storms. The first storm practically destroyed the boat he was rowing, turned it upside down, so he lost all his supplies, and he rowed for 2 weeks with nothing, and he lived on seawater and fish blood. He drank seawater and fish blood and carried on rowing. And the damage that did to his internal organs subsequently killed him. He died of heart failure about a year after that. Anyway, I managed to get hold of his cousin, Jeff Allen, who'd also rowed with him on the first trip across the Atlantic from west to east. And they rowed to Barbados. And what was really odd was that I'd already got that line in. I'll be in Barbados in a couple of weeks with a rum on the table and yarns by the yard. And then I'd found this guy who'd rowed there. I mean, why there? So it's an amazing synchronicity keeps happening to me. And then Mr. Breeze is from Barbados as well, you know, the man from the island. So again, with no conscious effort at all, I'd kind of pinned these things, and they kept coming back. So I phoned Jeff up and said, you know, would you mind if we dedicated this song to Don? And he said, mind, I'd be absolutely delighted, because no one's ever recognised what he's done, and someone really ought to. So we've dedicated this song to Don, and I've published the website in the sleeve, so you can go and see his diary, and you can share in what I've seen. You know, you can share with what he went through, and the unpretentiousness of the guy, the light-heartedness of him, even in the most extreme circumstances. When he's talking about how all the skin's come off his backside from rowing, and how he's got no skin anymore on his hands, and the pain he's in, but in a really light-hearted, jokey sort of way, like the whole thing's just a big laugh, you know. It's astounding, you know. He must have been a wonderful guy. I would have loved to have met him. But of course, the whole song's a metaphor as well for the epic struggle through life, and for choosing to turn your back on the world and pit yourself against the world single-handed, and pit yourself against the elements and try and achieve the impossible. And then there's that one little scene in it about the games teacher calling him a cream puff, which is directly from my life, because the games teacher at our school sort of dragged me up in front of the whole class and called me a cream puff, and ridiculed me in front of the whole school because I was such a physical wimp. Still am. And in a way, he did me a huge favour, because he put such a chip on my shoulder that it drove me. You know, it drove me for 20 years. Maybe it's still driving me to some extent. You know, I think you do sometimes need an element of revenge in ambition. I think a lot of ambitious people are just trying to make up for something from way back. You know, they're trying to prove something, or they're trying to get their own back on someone. And I've been trying to get my own back on him. Bloody games teacher.